Welcome to the Deep Dive, friends. Imagine for a moment if some of the oldest biblical narratives you thought you knew. Well, what if they had an entirely different, more detailed director's cut? A version that might just reveal hidden layers and, surprising insights we've overlooked. We reckon here in Overton County, we appreciate a good story, especially one that deepens our walk and understanding.
That's right.
Today, we're taking a plunge into the Book of Jubilees, a truly fascinating ancient Jewish text that, well, some folks affectionately call the Little Genesis.
Little Genesis. Yeah, I've heard that.
Now, this isn't just another old book we dug up. It comes with a mighty big claim. It presents itself as a direct revelation from God to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Right there on the mountain.
Yeah, a divine expansion and rewriting of Genesis and even parts of Exodus. Our source material for this deep dive, it comes from carefully selected excerpts of R.H. Charles's English translation. He was a scholar who knew his way around these ancient texts like a farmer knows his fields.
He certainly did. A solid source.
Our mission today, you see, is to unpack these hidden layers, to reveal surprising details, unique theological perspectives, and, well, to get a real good glimpse into early Jewish thought. I'm genuinely excited to uncover these hidden layers with you all and see what new insights this lesser-known treasure holds for us.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how this book offers a unique window into the rich intellectual and spiritual world of ancient Judaism. It's not just about different stories. It's about different understandings of divine order and human responsibility.
Right.
It's kind of like finding an old, dusty family Bible with notes in the margins from folks who walked a similar path but were wrestling with God's truth from a different vantage point. It makes you lean in and listen, doesn't it?
It surely does. So let's lay a foundation for what exactly this Book of Jubilees is.
Right.
From what we've seen, it's a Palestinian Jewish text from the pre-rabbinic era.
That's right, pre-rabbinic. So this is before the kind of formalized rabbinic Judaism we might think of later really took firm shape.
Okay. And it's essentially a rewritten version of Genesis and Exodus. But it's not just a casual retelling, is it? I mean, how does Jubilees actually present its own authority? What makes it so different from, say, a commentary or maybe just a religious legend?
Yeah, that's a key distinction.
Yeah.
The authority it claims for itself is, well, it's quite something. It's presented as a direct revelation from God to Moses up on Mount Sinai.
Wow.
With all the laws and historical divisions ordained and written on the heavenly tables.
Heavenly tables. What does that mean exactly?
Well, when it talks about these heavenly tables, you should think of them as the divine statute book, kind of like a celestial blueprint for the earthly Mosaic law.
Ah, okay.
It's not just the set of suggestions. It's portrayed as the eternal divine order of things, a direct transcription from God's own archive, so to speak.
That's an incredible claim of divine origin, a heavenly blueprint. It makes me wonder, though, if it holds such high authority, why isn't Jubilees part of the accepted canon for most Jewish and Christian traditions today? That seems odd.
That's an excellent question, and it's something scholars continue to wrestle with. Its exclusion from later canons really speaks to the evolving nature of what was considered authoritative over time.
And where did this book likely originate? Like what language?
The scholarly consensus points to Hebrew as the original language. You can kind of infer that from linguistic quirks and Hebraisms that pop up in later versions, like the Ethiopic one Charles translated.
Gotcha.
As for when it was written, scholars generally place it in the latter years of the 2nd century BC, maybe during the reign of John Hyrcanus.
Okay, so pretty old.
Oh, yeah. And here's a tidbit that helps us understand some of its unique perspectives. The author was, not improbably, a Sadducean priest.
A Sadducean priest. Now, that is significant, isn't it? Because the Sadducees, they were different from the Pharisees.
Exactly. Unlike the emerging Pharisees, Sadducees typically emphasized the strict literal interpretation of the written Torah. They generally didn't accept oral traditions or concepts like the resurrection, which the Pharisees did. So this background helps explain some of its specific theological stances, its real focus on certain laws, which I'm sure we'll get into.
So we're talking about a text that claims to be direct divine revelation, essentially God's own detailed account of early history, delivered right to Moses, maybe even before the Torah as we know it was fully compiled. It's like unearthing an old deed that rewrites the history of your own property right here in Livingston.
Yeah, something like that.
This is where it gets really interesting as we uncover something we thought we knew, but Well, there's a whole lot more to it.
And looking at this in a broader context, it just makes you think about how different communities, even way back then, wrestled with God's word and, believed they had access to a deeper truth. It's not just retelling, it's clarifying and expanding based on what they considered divine and eternal, what they believed was the authentic, original revelation.
All right, let's dive into some of those expanded narratives then, because this is where familiar faces take on some unfamiliar details. Enoch's story is fascinatingly expanded here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Take Enoch, for instance. We know him from Genesis as the one who walked with God and then was just taken away.
Right, vanished.
But Jubilees paints a much richer picture. In Jubilees, Enoch marries a woman named Edna, daughter of Daniel, and becomes the father of Methuselah. Standard enough, maybe.
Okay.
But here's where it gets truly unique. Enoch spends 6 Jubilees of years. Now, a Jubilee is 49 years, so that's a staggering 294 years.
Oh.
Living with angels, learning and writing everything on earth and in the heavens.
Imagine getting that kind of access. 294 years with angels. Enoch basically becomes the ultimate investigative journalist, kind of embedded with angels, recording cosmic history.
That's a good way to put it.
And testifying against the watchers who sinned with human daughters. That's another story in itself.
It is. And then he's uniquely taken from men and brought to the Garden of Eden to write condemnation and judgment.
To Eden. So not just up to heaven, but back to Eden to write judgment. The real takeaway here, I guess, is how Jubilees expands our understanding of divine revelation beyond just the familiar canon. It suggests figures like Enoch were privy to cosmic secrets that really reshaped early Jewish views on judgment and destiny.
It does. It gives you something to chew on, doesn't it?
It makes you wonder what other divine stories are still out there, hidden from our regular sight.
It suggests a profound role for Enoch as a celestial scribe, not just a righteous man walking with God, but one privy to divine secrets and the very workings of judgment.
So much detail that reframes familiar stories. But Enoch isn't the only familiar face that Jubilees illuminates in new ways. What about the very beginning, back in the Garden of Eden? We all know Adam and Eve's story, or think we do.
Right.
But Jubilees add some fascinating tidbits there, too. For example, it says Adam named all the beasts, just like in Genesis, okay? But then it adds that they dwelled in Eden for 7 years before the serpent approached Eve.
7 years. Not just a few days, yeah.
7 whole years. And that serpent showed up in the 2nd month on the 17th day of that 7th year. Very specific.
That specificity is remarkable, isn't it? But maybe the most surprising detail after the fall is this. Jubilees says the mouth of all beasts and of cattle and of birds so that they could no longer speak was closed by God.
They could talk before.
Apparently. Previously, the text says they had all spoken one with another with one lip and with one tongue.
Yeah.
And a key question kind of arises from this. Why this specific detail about the animals losing speech?
Yeah, why?
It seems to highlight the profound cosmic and physical impact of the fall, not just on humanity, but on creation itself. It's a sobering thought, ain't it, how sin touches everything.
That's a truly profound detail, the entire creation suffering the consequences of human sin. It paints a much grander, maybe sadder picture of the fall, doesn't it? Did this expanded view influence other ancient texts or beliefs, do you know?
Well, it's certainly a view that emphasizes the holistic impact of sin. And while tracing direct lines of influence is always kind of tricky.
Sure. It definitely reflects a broader ancient worldview where human actions had real cosmic repercussions. It deepens the tragedy of the fall immensely, I think.
It makes you wonder what other surprising consequences or maybe retributions Jubilees details. What about Cain's fate, for instance? The Bible doesn't specify how he died, right?
No, it doesn't. But Jubilees is very clear about Cain's retribution.
How so?
It states that Cain was killed when his house fell upon him, and he died in the midst of his house.
Oh, wow.
For with a stone he had killed Abel, and by a stone was he killed in righteous judgment. It explicitly links this to that ancient principle of lex talionis, the law of retribution.
An eye for an eye, or a stone for a stone in this case.
Exactly. It states right after, with the instrument with which a man kills his neighbor, with the same shall he be killed. It's a stark example of divine justice being meted out precisely according to the offense. That idea was very important in some ancient Jewish legal traditions.
It really emphasizes the unwavering precision of God's justice, as seen through the lens of this book.
And then there's Abram, our patriarch Abraham. Jubilees gives him a backstory that fleshes out his character in ways you might not expect. It says that at age 14, Abram begins to understand the errors of idolatry and separates from his father's worship, praying directly to the Creator, a teenage rebel for God.
Right. And what's fascinating here is this portrayal of Abraham as proactively seeking God and actively contributing to human progress rather than just, passively responding to divine commands later on.
He wasn't just waiting for the call from Ur.
Exactly. He's presented as a seeker from a young age. It's a much more dynamic figure.
Not only that, he apparently gains renown by confronting and turning back clouds of ravens that were devouring sown seed. He was basically a one-man scarecrow operation.
Oh, yeah. Protecting the crops.
But perhaps the most surprising detail, and one I can truly appreciate with our farming heritage here in Overton County, is that Abram invents a seed-scattering device for plows, teaching artificers how to make it.
Isn't that something? An agricultural innovator.
It really is. This isn't just some quirky detail. It profoundly reshapes our image of Abraham, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It speaks to a profound respect for knowledge and practical ingenuity alongside spiritual devotion. This detail really challenges the idea that patriarchs were solely spiritual figures.
Right.
It demonstrates that ancient Jewish thought, or at least this strand of it, valued practical innovation and proactive human contribution as central to a life of faith.
And there's more, right, about language.
Yes. The text also portrays him as recovering the lost Hebrew language, which it calls the tongue of the creation, and studying the books of his fathers, written in Hebrew.
The original language, wow.
Furthermore, he's depicted as the first to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, instituting it near Beersheba. This emphasis on Hebrew as the original sacred language and Abram's role in its recovery is quite significant for the author's theological viewpoint, linking back to that idea of original, perfect revelation.
So Abram isn't just a patriarch of faith. He's a teenage theological rebel, an avian scarecrow, and an agricultural innovator. That's a lot to unpack. Like some of those ingenious farmers we've got right here in Putnam County, always figuring out a better way to work the land.
It really is. It's a reminder that faith ain't just about waiting around. It's about doing, learning, and seeking truth, always striving to improve and understand God's creation.
All right, let's dig into the theological deep dive now, because Jubilees has some very distinct views on things like the calendar, angels, and the law. First off, the calendar. This book is apparently a strong advocate for a very specific calendar.
It truly is. Jubilees rigorously advocates for a strict 364-day solar calendar.
364 days, not 365 and a quarter?
Nope, 364, exactly 52 weeks. And the purpose of this, according to the text, was crucial. It ensured that all festivals would always fall on the same day of the week.
Predictable.
Exactly, which stood in stark contrast to the lunar calendar that later Judaism largely adopted, where festival dates shift relative to the day of the week. This was a major point of polemic for the author, meaning a strong, often aggressive argument against other views. This wasn't just a calendar preference, it was framed as a fierce theological battle over divine order itself.
Wow.
It reveals a deep, ancient desire for absolute certainty and precision in worship, something that, continues to resonate in religious debates even today.
So it wasn't just about marking days. It was about upholding what they believed was God's precise and unchanging order for worship. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there's the angelology and demonology, which you mentioned is far more detailed than what you find in our familiar biblical accounts.
Indeed. It introduces a very detailed hierarchy of angels. You've got the angel of the presence, who dictates directly to Moses on Sinai.
The one giving him this book, essentially.
Right. And then angels of sanctification, along with other angels who preside over natural phenomena, winds, clouds, seasons, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But what truly stands out is the figure of Prince Mastema.
Mastema. Okay, who's he?
He's a central figure, described as the chief of evil spirits, kind of akin to Satan in later thought, but maybe more specific here.
How so?
Mastema actively tempts, accuses, and tries to lead people astray. The book even says he tried to kill Moses at one point.
Really?
Yeah. And strikingly, God explicitly allows 10% of the evil spirits, the fallen watcher's offspring, to remain under Mastema's command specifically for the purpose of corruption and testing humanity.
Wait, God allows it for testing.
That's what Jubilees says, yeah.
Yeah.
10% remain to corrupt and lead astray before my judgment.
Huh. This isn't just a simple good versus evil, then. It's more like a cosmic chess match where God permits a certain level of spiritual opposition for his own purposes.
Yeah.
That's a deep concept, like a spiritual battle raging around us, maybe even here in Livingston, that we might not always see, but the Book of Jubilees suggests is quite real and active.
It is deep. And stepping back, what's the larger significance here? Well, this sophisticated demonology and angelology, it really reflects a theological development happening in that intertestamental period.
Between the Old and New Testaments.
Exactly. Where unseen forces, both good and bad, are seen to be more directly influencing human affairs and testing human faith. It certainly gives you something to ponder about the unseen world and the spiritual struggles we face, adding maybe a layer of depth to the familiar narratives of testing and temptation.
Definitely food for thought. And finally, let's talk about their emphasis on the law. You mentioned the Sadducean connection. This book stresses a really strict observance of specific laws, sometimes with severe penalties. How does this compare to other Jewish traditions of the time?
Yeah, the book has a very strong, you might say rigid, emphasis on adherence to the law, particularly Sabbath observance and circumcision.
Key identity markers.
Absolutely. It's explicit that the Sabbath is solely for Israel, not for other nations, and it prescribes severe penalties, including death for non-observance.
Death for breaking the Sabbath. Wow.
Yes. It also strongly condemns intermarriage, calling it working shame in Israel, and says it's punishable by stoning and burning for the woman involved.
Goodness. Very harsh.
It is, and in terms of purity, it explicitly requires people to cover their shame, which seems to be a direct protest against the Greek customs of public nakedness in gymnasiums that were becoming influential then.
Pushing back against Hellenism.
Right. And of course, eating blood is strictly forbidden, just as in Leviticus, but emphasized again here. The text's likely Sadducean leanings probably explain this intense focus on the strict letter of the written law. It often stands in contrast to emerging Pharisaic traditions, which were sometimes finding ways to mitigate harshness or introduce oral interpretations.
So it's representing a particular, maybe more conservative or literalist stream of thought at the time.
You could say that, yeah. It's a testament to how seriously some folks took God's law, down to every jot and tittle, believing it was the unchangeable heavenly decree.
So they were really serious about following the rules, even the ones that seem harsh to us now.
Yeah.
What about their view of the end times, their eschatology? How did they envision the unfolding of God's plan for humanity, given this focus on the law?
Well, the book's eschatology is primarily focused on the law. Surprise, surprise.
Makes sense for this book.
It depicts messianic woes, times of trouble, as a direct result of transgression, of not following the law. But this leads to a happier period inaugurated by, guess what? Renewed study and observance of the law.
So repentance and obedience bring about the better times.
Precisely. And this transformation is seen as gradual. It leads to extended lifespans, people living nearly 1,000 years again, like before the flood peace and the eventual absence of Satan or Mastema's influence.
The gradual restoration.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the shift in emphasis compared to some other apocalyptic views. Instead of a purely catastrophic sudden end, it's presented more as a progressive spiritual development tied directly to human adherence to divine law. The author even seemed to believe that this Messianic Kingdom had already set in some ways during his time.
So it's a vision of God's work unfolding over time, not just in a flash, and happening through our faithfulness to his commands.
That seems to be the core idea, yeah. Improvement through obedience.
So what does this all mean for us here in Overton County and beyond? This deep dive into the Book of Jubilees isn't just an archaeological dig into some dusty old book, is it?
Not at all.
It gives us a really vibrant, detailed look at how some ancient scholars understood divine revelation, the unfolding of history, and the very nature of good and evil. It's a rich tapestry indeed that reminds us of the long journey of faith.
And this text, it challenges us to consider the evolution of religious thought, how different communities interpreted foundational narratives in their own times and contexts. It prompts us to reflect on how our own understanding of divine law in the future is shaped by the traditions we engage with. Imagine how a text like this would have influenced conversations around the dinner table in Beersheba or Hebron, just like it might spark a good discussion around your kitchen table right here in Crossville or Algood.
Absolutely. As you go about your day, maybe consider, how much of our understanding of faith and history is shaped by, well, a single narrative, maybe the most familiar one, and what rich insights might be waiting in these lesser-known texts, just waiting for us to dig in and explore. Keep your minds and hearts open to the Lord's leading in all his word, both the familiar and the new.
Well said.
We sure hope this deep dive into the Book of Jubilees has sparked your curiosity and maybe provided some fascinating insights. If you enjoyed our exploration, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you find your deep dives.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Share this with a friend or maybe your Sunday school class, and let us know what scriptures you'd like us to dive into next. We genuinely love hearing your thoughts and questions.
We really do.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now, for all you good folks listening, whether you're down the road in Gainesboro or way up in Cookeville, we appreciate you tuning in.
Thanks, y'all.
Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Keep seeking, keep learning, and may your paths be filled with his blessing.